Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Lee and I love to make videos on fitness, travel, and lifestyle. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, then please make sure you hit the subscribe button so that we can be friends. So this is a very impromptu video. I'm waiting on Cameron to actually come home. He really wanted like these purple Doritos. We're having taco salad tonight. And I got tortilla chips and he really wanted to have purple bag Doritos with the taco salad. So he ran out real quick to go get some, and because the store I went to, I knew that this is his favorite kind, but the store that I went to didn't have them. They was like sold out. So he's like driving around to a bunch of stores looking for purple bag Doritos. Anyways, let me not get sidetracked. I used to do a bunch of story time videos on my channel and I haven't done one in a while. I haven't like sat down and filmed a video in a while, so I figured I would just, while I'm waiting, film this quick video for y'all on a quick story time. So this will be the story time of how my thesis did not get accepted in grad school and I didn't graduate, y'all. Which is like, you know, I can laugh about it now, but let me tell you, I was crying. It was so traumatic to me. So I'll just kind of go through the experience, and I don't have no notes, no nothing. This is just gonna be based off of, you know, off the top on how I remember it. I went to grad school back in 2015. And so the program, I was going part-time after work. The program was only supposed to be 2 years. So I was supposed to graduate in 2017. Did not happen. So I was taking 2 classes a quarter, but y'all, working full-time and going to grad school is no joke. Like, I just couldn't, I had so much stuff going on at the time. Like when I started, like I didn't have a car, so like where my grad school was at was in like the hood. Like if you're familiar with DC, my grad school was in Anacostia. So I would like go to work and then I would take a shuttle over to like my school, which was in Anacostia. But then when the class was over, because it's 3 hours long, class was from 6 to 9. So when class was over, I had to like walk in Anacostia to the train station. So some nights, like if I had enough money, I would catch the bus and then catch the bus to the train station, and then other nights I would just walk. And it was just a dangerous situation to be in altogether because it was literally in the hood. So I eventually just switched. Instead of going 2 days a week, I switched to just go 1 day a week. And that kind of like, in my mind, lowered my chances of getting, you know, stabbed or whatever. The area has definitely changed since then. So if you're like in the DC area now, think about it like back in 2014, 2015, like that era, because that's when I was going to grad school there. So because I was going to school part-time, because the part-time program was 2 classes a quarter, I was only going 1. That's all background information. If you're new here too, my degree is in strategic intelligence. That's like when you're pretty much trying to like capture, like track our military strategies against like other countries in war. Like that's what my background is on. And like knowing me in real life and seeing like that's what my master's was on is like, it's just not mathing right now. Because it's just not mathing. But anyways, the program was free to go to from my school. So at the time, I just thought that was like a no-brainer. I was new to the DC area. I was single. So in my mind, I went to grad school because I was gonna find my man, y'all. You couldn't tell me nothing. I just knew that my man was in grad school. And then when I got to grad school, everybody was like old, married, and I was the only minority person in my program. So my husband was not there. My husband was not there. So yeah, so that's just kind of like background on like my grad school, you know, experience and like kind of starting off, right? Grad school was a struggle. I hated the program. I wanted to quit so many times, and I was just going through like a lot in my life. Like I remember at this time too, I had gotten into a car accident. So I was like struggling to like get dressed and like walk. Like I was in physical therapy for a whole year, and at that time I was still going to grad school. So like trying to like carry my books to class and like walking to the bus stop and trying to catch the train, like it was just physically taxing. So like I was just going through a lot, and I hated the program. I had no friends in grad school. Like it just wasn't the experience I thought it was gonna be. Like I thought I would go there meet friends my age. Nobody was my age. I was like the youngest person in all of my classes. I was the only minority in all of my classes. So it was just like not the experience that I thought it was going to be, but it was free. So I was just kept like pushing through it because it was free. My job was paying for it, right? So I was just like, oh, this is a great opportunity. So I didn't want to drop out, but I like wasn't feeling it. Like very early on in the program, I was not feeling it. Fast forward to 2017. So the 2017 to 2018 time frame is when I was writing my thesis. So because I was going one class a quarter, I didn't graduate in 17. Instead, I was just gonna push it back to graduate in 2018, which wasn't a big deal to me, right? If you're familiar with like the grad school process, when you're in getting your master's, you pretty much write a thesis. And a thesis is supposed to be like a long, very thorough research paper where you pick a research topic and you pretty much like defend your topic. I wish my phone is upstairs charging because it's dead. That's why I was just like, I'm gonna just turn on my camera. Otherwise, I would give y'all like a Google explanation of what a thesis is, but like off the top of my mind, just to give y'all like an idea. That's what it was. I had no like particular areas of study that I wanted to focus on because I didn't want to be in grad school. So I had no area of focus that I wanted to do. Where you see other people who go to grad school and they're like one of my friends, she has her PhD in public health, and she is really adamant, and she has done years and years and years of research on like HIV and AIDS. So I'm sure like when it was time for her to do her dissertation or her thesis, she probably was like, oh my gosh, I already know what I'm gonna study. I'm really interested in this. Like, I had nothing like that. Absolutely nothing like that. I couldn't stand my program. It's not what I wanted to do at all. So I got this email. This professor, we're gonna call him Professor B. You know what? That's really his name. So like, you know, we just gonna just put it on out there, okay? I don't got no shame in my game. That's what it is. So Professor B. So I got an email from Professor B. He sent the email out to everybody in our like cohort, and a cohort is just pretty much everyone who's supposed to graduate the same year as you, in the same concentration of study as you. So he sent the email out to our entire cohort and was like, I'm looking to take on 12 students to do research in this particular field of study, and if you're interested, provide me a writing sample and apply to be in my research study, right? And there's two things that I thought was freaking awesome about that email. One is that I didn't have to pick a thesis topic. My thesis topic was selected for me. And two, I didn't have to go out and find a chair. So that's another thing. So when you're in a master's program, you have to select a thesis topic, so like a topic that you want to spend a whole year researching. And then the other part is you have to get like a professor to sponsor you, to say, hey, I'm going to work with you on this research project for the next year and sponsor you. So two of those very difficult things were done for me, like if I got accepted into this research group. So I didn't have to pick a topic, he picked it for me, and I didn't have to find a chair. So I applied to be in his research group, right? And I submitted a writing sample and he selected me. So me and 11 other, you know, lucky or unlucky people were selected into being his research study. So what my thesis was on, my first thesis, was on economic stability in Sudan. If you are familiar with the grad school process too, you know that like typically you're in constant communication with your chair, you're turning in progress updates of your thesis to them, you're meeting with other people in your cohort, like it's a collectively like research project. So in this particular case, it was 11 other people, it was 12 of us all together, and we all had different countries in Africa. In the year that I worked with this professor, not once did I meet another person in my cohort. He never held any type of cohort groups. We never got to see what other people websites that they were working on that was working for them, research articles. He never coordinated anything with the other cohort members. Like I, to this day, never met them. So he sent an initial email out that was like, hey, these are the 12 people that had been selected for the cohort and like what countries. That's how I found out what country I was working on. And that was like the extent. I never met any of them. So that was red flag number one. Like if you're in a research study group, you know, collective like paper or journal with 11 other people, then it's probably a good idea that you collaborate with them because y'all are pretty much doing the same thing just for different countries. So that was like red flag number one. Red flag number two, So I would send a thesis timeline of like, hey, these are specific dates that I plan on, you know, getting my paper done by, and these are like the timeline and stuff that I'm giving to myself, right? I submit him like my thesis timeline. He agrees to the timeline, and so the timeline will say like, okay, chapter 1 will be done by this date. Like I'll submit it like a draft to you. You review it by this day, have it back to me, and then I'll submit a final copy of the draft of chapter 1 to you by this day. And then it's the same thing. My thesis had, I believe, 8 different chapters. So I had like 8 each month. I had like a different chapter due to him, and he would revise it and supposed to give it back to me, and then I would submit him the next, like revise it, submit him the final of that draft, and then submit the next chapter. Okay. So throughout the time that I was working with him for like a whole year, I would submit to him chapters that I was working on, and he would provide me feedback. He would give me like little edits and stuff, and I would make all the edits and turn it back into him. But the feedback was constantly like, it was very consistent, and like what it was saying was like, sorry y'all, my camera, the SD card was full, so I'm gonna have to hurry this up. So I would be submitting chapters and stuff to Professor B, and he would be providing me feedback, and the feedback was very minimal, and it was telling me, hey, you're doing a great job, keep going, can't wait to review the next chapter, you know, keep up the good work. And he would submit my old chapters back to me with like little edits, and I would make all the edits, but the edits were like very minimal. Okay, so then I did that for chapter 1, chapter 2. So like, as you can imagine, months are going by, y'all. I had 8 chapters, and each chapter was a month. So I'm 8 months in, like hella months are going by, right? And we started to get close to like the time of where I had to submit my final version in order for him to review it and for me to graduate. So like, let's say I have to have my complete thesis done by June 1st, right? So I was talking to him, it's like May, I'm like finishing up like chapter 7. So I have like one whole chapter left to do, right? And I have like less than a month to do it. But I'm talking to him, and I'm like, hey, I know it's getting close to the deadline in order for me to submit my thesis. I am behind in schedule. I wanted to see, you know, I plan on submitting this by this day, and I just want to make sure that you're going to be available to review it. Give me the feedback, you know, back enough time so that I can make the corrections and then give you the final version so that you can review and approve my thesis, right? And I'm saying this in like May, and my thesis is due like June 1st, right? So this man responds back to my email, because I'm like giving him a heads up like, hey, I know that I'm pretty much like a month behind, but I plan on working, you know, overtime. I'm gonna put forth all this extra effort, write my last chapter, and I'm gonna give it to you by this date. And I want to make sure that you're going to be willing and able to review it by this date, to provide me the feedback so that I can give it to you, you know, by June 1st, so that you can review it and approve it, and I can graduate on time, right? So when I sent that email, he sent me back an email and was pretty much like, there's no way that you're going to make this timeline in order for me to review it, approve it, and get it back to you by June 1st. He was like, there's no way that could happen. And I probably had like 30 days, right, to write one chapter. He was like, there's no way. And I'm kind of like, you know, what you mean? Like, like, what do you mean? If I'm telling you that like, hey, if I'm giving you a heads up, I know I'm behind, I plan on catching up, I'm gonna give it to you by this day, and you pretty much will have like a week to review it, give me the feedback, and then I can make the changes. Like, what do you mean? Like, I've turned in 7 chapters already. Like, I don't understand, you know, like, what is you saying? So his email was very much so like, nah, like, I don't think that that's possible to do it in a month. And I'm like, it is. Like, if I turn it, you know, if I turn it into you by this day, like, will you be able to do it? So then he finally like agrees, right? But at the time, it didn't feel like he was like begrudgingly agreeing, you know what I mean? Like, it felt like he was just like, hey, you know, I just want to manage your expectations. I think that your, you know, timeline has slipped, and it's a little aggressive for you to write a chapter within a month. But if you do it, I'm more than, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like how I expected him to be. But he kind of was like, I don't think that you can do it. And I'm like, well, I'm not asking you if you think I can do it. I'm asking you, if I turn it in on this day, can you review it and approve it? You know what I mean? Provide my feedback, I make the changes, and you approve it. You know what I mean? So what did I do, y'all? I took off work. I was pulling all-nighters. Like, at the time I had a supervisor that was so like supportive of me finishing my thesis, and he just was like so good to me. So he was like, I really want to see you graduate, blah 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 blah. So he was like, however much time you need off, I'm gonna approve your time off, finish your thesis, right? And literally I was taking off like 2 days a week in order to write my thesis. And I was going to school and writing my thesis, and like all weekend I was writing my thesis, all nights I was writing my thesis. Like, I was pretty much putting in so much overtime to finish my thesis, y'all. And I finished a chapter in the timeline that I said I was gonna finish it by, right? I turned it into Professor B, and he responds back, and I'm telling y'all, I got all of this in email, right? He responds back and is like, this is not quality work, blah 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 blah. Like, because I turned in my whole entire thesis, right, with the last chapter. I turned in my entire thesis with the last chapter, just so he can see like, hey, this is the format, this is kind of everything that you had me make corrections on, like this is the final product. And everything from chapters 1 through 7 he had already reviewed and approved, and so he just only needed to review chapter 8. But I gave it to him, the whole thing at one time, so that he can see, like, you know, making sure that it all makes sense, that it's all flowing together, that the format of the whole thing is there. Like, I'm giving it to him all at one time to like speed up the process, right? Y'all, he started going back to like chapter 1 and was like making significant changes. Like, he was asking me to add in like entire sections that changed like the whole scope of what my thesis was. Like, it was like significantly changing it. And he like went back to chapter 1. He's like changing stuff in chapter 3. Like, the changes that he was making, and this is all chapters that he had already reviewed and approved and I already made changes on, right, y'all? And he was asking me to like increase the scope of what my thesis was. So like, the best way that I could put this into example would be like, if you are writing a paper, like let's say you're writing a paper on Cadillac Escalades, right? And then in the final stretch, your professor asks you like, oh, you know, Cadillac Escalades is great, but what if you compared Cadillac Escalades to Porsches? And it's like the final stretch, and you asking me to do like a comparison where my whole focus was on this one thing, and now you're asking me to compare a whole different, like, make that make sense, y'all. So I was like, oh, hell nah. This is no, absolutely not. But the emails that he was sending me was sounding like real supportive though. Like, but they was like shady supportive. So like, he's going back and changing stuff that he had already approved 6, 7, 8 months ago. But he's like saying like, you know, I'll help you submit the paperwork to extend it to ask for more time, and we can just work another year together and make sure that, you know, you're on the right page, and I have no issues with continuing to work with you as your chair. Like, sounding real supportive like that. But it really wasn't supportive though, because it's like, I done spend a whole year on this paper, and you know, on this book pretty much, and you have reviewed it, approved all my previous chapters, and now you're asking me to like significantly change it in the final stretch. And then you're being like, quote unquote, nice about it. Like, you know, I'll work with you to submit an extension, you know, with the dean, and I'll continue to work with you throughout the next school year, and we can, you know, make sure that everything is on the up and up, right? So I filed a complaint. Because I was devastated, y'all, because like, he would not, I was devastated. Like, if you like knew me at that time, like, I had worked so hard on this thesis. I had done so much. Like, my grandma had died that year, like, and I was still like just pushing through, and I had taken off so much work to write this thesis, and I felt like I did everything that I was supposed to do in accordance to like what the rules and policies was. And at the end, you were telling me like, you know what, I don't even like the idea, and you assigned me the idea. You know what I mean? Like, what? I was devastated. So like, my family had already bought like flights and stuff to come out and watch me graduate. I had got like all of this stuff for like my graduation party. Like, I was devastated, y'all. So I appealed it. And I worked with the dean of the school, and I submitted him my thesis, and I submitted him the emails of the professor. Like I had, cause like I worked with him like extensively over a year. So I had like tons of emails that I submitted that was like that Professor B was telling me, oh, you know, you're doing a great job, and the edits that he was having me make. And I can show you how, like in my final product that I submitted, how I make the edits that he told me to make, right? So I had all of my evidence together, y'all. I was like, there's no way in hell that I'm not gonna graduate, right? Because I did everything I was supposed to do, and I got proof that this man is trying to like screw me over in the final stretch. I got proof of it, and I did all the stuff that he told me to do. So like, you know, what's up? Somebody need to go above him and sign off on my thesis, and I'm gonna be good, right? Y'all, that is not what happened. That is not what happened, unfortunately. The dean ended up calling me in to like schedule a meeting. I was talking to an ombudsman, which is like, I researched that and found out what that was too. So an ombudsman is like someone who works outside of the school and is able to, it's like a third party assessment, right? So the dean had called me into the school to have a meeting. I went to that meeting with the dean, and there was like this, I'm gonna just call it what it is, y'all. So I went to the meeting with the dean. The dean was there, and he has also had a minority professor attend the meeting, right? Why is that? You know what I mean? Like, why is that? But just like when I'm walking into the meeting, like I noticed that it's this black woman there, and she introduces herself and she says that she's a professor, blah, 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 blah. So while I'm in that meeting with the dean is pretty much telling me like, hey, I reviewed the evidence of your all of your emails, all of your feedback from your chair, and I reviewed your thesis. And he's like, unfortunately, like, this is not a thesis. And I'm like, what you mean this is not a thesis? So apparently the professor had me and 11 other students because I've never been to grad school before. I never wrote a thesis in my life. I'm working under the close direction of my chair. So I think I'm writing a thesis. And what I'm really writing looks like it's like a book, y'all. Like, it's not a thesis at all. It looks like it's a book. And so me and the 11 other students who was working with this professor were all working on a book. Like, we were all collectively working on a book of Africa's economic, environment, right? And to us, we're thinking that we're working on theses, but the dean was like, this is not a thesis. This is reading more like a actual book. And what is really so freaking messed up about that whole situation is that, I don't know if it's like that at y'all schools, but when you are working on a thesis, as if your chair signs off on your thesis, nobody else, like the dean reads your thesis, but they really don't read all the student theses. And so the only oversight that you really have when you're doing a thesis is your chair. And you have a reader, but you select your reader, and they're versed in the same field as like your thesis, but really like your chair is the person, right? Like your reader will read it for like a second eye, but they don't really have a say. Like, it's really your chair. So your chair, as long as you're writing what your chair wants you to write, because they're seen as like the SME, like the subject matter expert in whatever your thesis is, as long as they agree, nobody else cares, and you'll graduate. But if your chair doesn't agree, you don't graduate. And there's no oversight to ensure that situations like this don't occur. So this whole time, this whole year, my chair is giving me feedback and having me work on this book, that I'm gonna turn into them, and they're literally probably just gonna take my name off of it and put their name on it and publish it as a book. But he did say we would get, I didn't know it was a book. So he did say that we would get author credits, second author credits and stuff like that. But since he's the chair, he's gonna be the main author. But I was pretty much doing all of this research, spending all of this time writing all of these pages. My thesis was 80 pages, y'all. And it was a book for this chair, for Dr. B, Professor B, to publish as a book under him, with me listed as contributing author or whatever. I was sick. I was sick. Like, I had no idea. And nobody was checking it. I was only turning my pages and stuff into Dr. B, into Professor B. And so, like, the only reason that it was even brought to anyone else's attention, like the dean's attention, is because I was appealing the fact that Dr. B wasn't signed off on my thesis. And he wasn't signed off on my thesis because he wanted me to do more research for him for this freaking book, right? Sick. I was sick. So in that meeting with the dean was like, you know, I'm so sorry this happened to you. We're gonna, oh, that's Cameron, he's about to come on. We're gonna investigate, we're gonna look into this, we're gonna investigate it, but, you know, unfortunately, you're gonna have to redo your thesis under the support of, and he introduced me to the black lady that was in the room. Hey, man, you can come in. But yeah, I'm gonna just finish up. So then he introduced me to the black lady that was in the room and was just like, you know, she's gonna be your new chair. She's gonna oversee your project. I'm so sorry this happened to you. We're just gonna do an investigation and we'll let you know. Y'all, they never told me anything. And I think that the reason like that they didn't really care is because my program was free. Like, I wasn't paying for anything, so it didn't come out of my pocket, but it was like years and years of my time that I spent working on this. So I was sick. You good, babe? And so it was that point that I was introduced to my new chair. Then I worked with her over another school year, over the next year. And if I'm being honest with myself, y'all, like, the second thesis that I wrote was completely different from the first thesis that I wrote. Like, they were, because the first thesis that I wrote was actually a book. It wasn't even a thesis. But like, even looking at the formats and just like working with the cohort under this woman, like, that whole experience was completely different than my first experience with Professor B. So yeah, I was sick. And to this day, I never got any update from the school on like what happened to Professor B. He actually still works there because I knew someone else who worked there. Professor B still works there. Nothing bad happened to him. And he just literally ruined graduation for me. I was so like sick. My family came because they all had bought tickets to come to DC and watch me graduate and stuff. They all still came and we made light of it and we still celebrated as if I graduated, but I didn't. My thesis was not accepted because it wasn't a thesis and I was sick. But yeah, all right, y'all. Cameron just came home with his purple bag of Doritos, so we're about to eat our taco salad. And I just wanted to share that experience with y'all. So I think and I hope that that is a one-of-a-kind experience. Hopefully nobody else is having like these crazy ass experiences where you work for a whole year secretly writing this book for your professor thinking that you're writing a thesis and you wasn't. So yeah, and you know, just so we can have a happy ending to the story, I did eventually, you know, with the help of my new professor, Professor G, wrote a thesis, had my thesis accepted. Very proud of my thesis. So my second thesis ended up being on threat indicators for terrorists, threat vulnerabilities to indicate terrorism in Sudan or something like that. Because I had already spent a whole year researching Sudan, so I was familiar with like the area and like just different like, yes, I'm not gonna bore y'all with the with the details. I did end up graduating. I was so proud of myself. My family didn't get to come out the second time when I actually walked, but my brother did get to come out and see me walk. My mom didn't get to come back out, but yeah, I still had a very, you know, happy ending. It all worked out for me. But yes, if y'all have a similar story, which like I said, I feel like it's one of a kind, but if y'all have a similar story or have any other like grad school horror story, please feel free to leave it down in the comments below, so that maybe we can help out our younger folks who are thinking about going to grad school and that they can see some things to consider and things to look out for when they're writing their theses, and make sure that they're not being tricked into, you know, helping professors write books for themselves. And we're just going to give you a contributing author credit. Like, sick. I was sick. So anyways, Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video even a little bit, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And that way you will be notified of when I make future videos. And yeah, I like these story times. I probably need to make more of these. All right, talk to you guys later. See you in the next one. Bye.